I want you to take a second and just imagine your normal morning routine. You know, the exact one I mean.
Right. It's completely on autopilot.
Exactly. The alarm clock goes off in the dark. You hit snooze at least once. You finally drag yourself out of bed, and maybe you're rushing to grab your things and get out the door.
Yeah.
It is entirely mundane. It's totally predictable.
Yeah.
Now, I want you to imagine that exact, completely ordinary routine being violently interrupted before the sun even comes up.
Which is terrifying.
Just leaving absolutely nothing behind but like a few haunting clues scattered on the cold pavement.
It's a profoundly unsettling scenario, really, because it shatters our baseline assumption of safety. We think we are safe in those mundane moments.
Oh, 100%.
And that specific nightmare actually became a reality in the early morning hours of June 27, 1995. This was for 27-year-old Jodi Huisentruit.
Right, the news anchor.
Yes, she was the beloved, really vibrant morning news anchor for Kim TTV in Mason City, Iowa. So, one minute she is on the phone with her producer, saying she overslept and is on her way to work, and the next minute she just vanishes into the dark.
Vanished completely into thin air. I mean, it is absolutely wild to me that a prominent public figure could just disappear like that.
Yeah, an entire community woke up to on their televisions every single morning.
Right, and from her own apartment parking lot, no less. This case has sat unsolved for over 3 decades now, just casting this heavy shadow over the entire region.
It has, but the landscape is shifting.
That's exactly why we are tearing into these files for today's deep dive. The landscape of this investigation has just shifted dramatically. I mean, a staggering $100,000 reward has been placed on the table.
Which is a massive amount of leverage.
It's huge. And a shocking new Roadside Confession has basically blown the doors off this 30-year mystery. So our mission today is to dig into all of this.
Right, because when a cold case suddenly experiences that kind of thermal event, you know, when the temperature of the investigation spikes after decades of just being totally frozen, the most critical step is to re-anchor ourselves to the foundational data.
He has to go back to the basics.
Exactly. In cold case methodology, timelines and physical evidence are really the only things immune to the passage of time. Memories fade, rumors mutate.
Oh, rumors definitely mutate over 30 years.
Yeah, but the physical reality of the crime scene remains totally static. So today, we are going to reconstruct the incredibly tight timeline of that morning, analyze the physical forensic evidence left at the key apartments, and really evaluate the primary persons of interest.
We'll break down the behavioral profiles too, right? Like looking at an older inner circle friend versus a neighborhood predator.
Yes, before we arrive at the explosive new intelligence brought forward by private investigator Steve Ridge.
Okay, so let's unpack that foundational data first. Because before anyone can start pointing fingers or, formulating theories about who took Jodi, we have to look at the mechanics of how and when this abduction was actually executed.
The timeline is everything.
It is so incredibly narrow. Honestly, it induces anxiety just looking at the police logs.
The sequencing of events is arguably the most restrictive element of this entire case. Let's trace her movements in those final 24 hours.
Okay, so June 26th.
Right. On June 26th, the day before she vanished, Jodi participated in a local Chamber of Commerce golf tournament. She was an avid golfer, very highly visible in the community.
So lots of people saw her that day.
Exactly. Following the tournament, she visited a friend's house to watch a videotape of her own recent 27th birthday party. And there is no evidence of distress, no unusual behavior, just a standard, fun evening.
Just a normal night.
Yeah. She then returned to her apartment to sleep ahead of her grueling early morning anchor shift.
And we really need to emphasize how brutal those morning news anchor hours are. I mean, they are living on a totally different circadian rhythm.
Right, they're waking up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, getting up when the rest of the world is in its deepest REM sleep. So let's fast forward to 4:10 a.m. on Tuesday, June 27th. Jodi hasn't arrived at the Kimenti station yet.
Which was unusual for her.
Very. Her producer, Amy Kunz, calls Jodi's apartment. And Jodi actually answers the phone.
This is such a crucial moment.
Right. She tells Amy she overslept, but she is actively getting ready and she's heading out the door.
That brief phone interaction establishes our ultimate baseline. It is literal forensic proof of life. It completely verifies that Jodi was alive, conscious, and inside her apartment unit at exactly 4:10 a.m.
But then the timeline immediately begins to compress, right?
Yeah, very fast. By 6 a.m., she has still not arrived at the station, which actually forces Amy Kunz to anchor the morning broadcast herself.
Wow.
And by 7:13 a.m., Kim MT staff officially request a welfare check from the Mason City Police.
And what the responding officers find at her apartment complex, the Key Apartments, it just paints this terrifying picture of sudden violence.
It really does.
Jodi's red Mazda Miata is parked in the lot, right where it should be. But scattered on the pavement around the vehicle are these incredibly personal, everyday items.
Right.
Like a bent car key, a pair of red high heels, a blow dryer.
The distribution of those items is the physical signature of a struggle. And the bent car key is a particularly crucial piece of forensic storytelling.
I was going to say, a key doesn't just bend from dropping it.
No, absolutely not. It bends when it is inserted into a lock and subjected to sudden, violent lateral force.
So she was attacked right at the door.
Exactly, meaning she was likely attacked at the exact microsecond she was unlocking her car. Furthermore, investigators documented drag marks on the pavement.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. This definitively categorizes the event as a forced abduction, not some sort of voluntary disappearance.
What blows my mind is the location of all this. An apartment parking lot at 4:30 a.m. is incredibly quiet. I mean, sound travels so clearly at that hour.
It does.
Someone had to have heard something, which makes the lack of intervention even more baffling. Like, did nobody notice a woman being dragged across the asphalt?
Well, auditory witnesses did actually come forward, though the information was a bit fragmented. Neighbors reported hearing screams originating from the parking lot area somewhere between 4:00 a.m. and 5:00 a.m.
Okay, so people did hear it.
Yes. Additionally, a separate witness reported observing a white Ford Econoline van idling nearby during that same generalized time frame.
The classic white van.
Right. But the police also recovered one critical piece of physical evidence from the scene, which was a partial palm print pulled from a vehicle or structure right near her car.
Now, you would think a palm print would just blow the case wide open, but they've never been able to match it, have they?
No, they haven't. And to understand why a partial palm print hasn't solved the case, you really have to look at the limitations of 1995 forensic technology.
Right. It wasn't exactly CSI back then.
Exactly. An AFIS, an automated fingerprint identification system, relies on plotting specific minutia points. Things like ridge endings, bifurcations, short ridges. A full palm print has a massive surface area with hundreds of data points. But a partial palm print, specifically from the edge of the hand like they found, might only yield a handful of usable points.
So it's just not enough data.
Right. It is a fantastic comparative tool to verify a suspect once you already have them sitting in an interrogation room, but it is a remarkably poor searching tool for querying a database of millions, especially with those 90s-era algorithms.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
If we look at this purely from a logistical standpoint, the window of opportunity here is terrifying. She's on the phone at 4:10 a.m.
Yeah.
She still has to finish getting ready, gather her things, and walk out to the lot.
Yeah.
And then the screams happen before 5:30 a.m.
The timing is incredibly tight.
It makes me think of like a highly choreographed stage play where the lead actress has exactly 90 seconds for a costume change in the dark behind the curtain.
That's a great analogy.
Because if the timing is off by a single minute, like if a neighbor walks their dog or if a delivery driver pulls in, the whole operation just collapses.
It completely falls apart.
Yeah. This wasn't someone holding her in a basement and deciding her fate over a period of weeks. This was a lightning-fast blitz attack.
And that term, blitz attack, is highly relevant in behavioral profiling. When law enforcement identifies a blitz attack executed with basically zero margin for error in the dark, they apply a statistical framework.
What does that framework look like?
Well, these types of attacks require one of two things. Either extreme geographic proximity, meaning the attacker was already hiding right there, or intimate knowledge of the victim's schedule.
Okay.
And statistically, the latter is far more common. So investigators immediately pivot to the victim's inner circle to find individuals who possessed that scheduling intelligence.
Which brings us directly to a man named John Van Cise.
Yes.
He was a seed salesman living in Mason City, about 20 years older than Jodi, and importantly, he was the last known person to see her alive. He was the friend whose house she visited the night before to watch that birthday video.
John Van Cise occupied a very prominent space in her personal life leading up to the abduction. The level of his involvement was significant.
Because he hosted the birthday party, right?
He did. He hosted the surprise 27th birthday party for her. And just the weekend prior, He organized a water skiing trip in Iowa City with Jodi and some other friends. He even told people he had named his boat after her.
Though investigators later noted the name was never actually painted on the vessel itself.
Right, exactly.
I know how those optics play out in the court of public opinion, though. You have a 20-year age gap, a man throwing these elaborate surprise parties for a young, beautiful television anchor, claiming to name a boat after her.
It looks bad.
It does. It is incredibly easy for people reading the headlines to just say, oh, he's obsessed, he's definitely the guy. The public loves a creepy narrative.
The optics definitely fueled immense public suspicion, and law enforcement subjected him to intense scrutiny because of it. The investigation into Van Cease literally spanned decades. They scrutinized his movements, his communications. As recently as 2017, a grand jury was convened to subpoena him.
Wow, 22 years later.
Yes. Law enforcement even obtained a specialized warrant to covertly install GPS tracking devices on his vehicles, hoping to monitor his movements to, a potential grave site.
But those trackers yielded absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
And this is where I really want to push back against the public narrative that painted him as this calculated villain. If we look at his actual behavioral response to the police, he voluntarily took and passed a police polygraph.
He did.
He voluntarily submitted to hypnosis to see if he could recall any subconscious details to help find her. He willingly provided his DNA and fingerprints to compare against the crime scene.
Right.
Those are the actions of a man desperately trying to clear his name. If he's the strategic mastermind capable of pulling off a 90-second, trace-free blitz attack in the dark, why on earth would he invite detectives to hypnotize him?
I hear your point about his cooperation, but we really have to analyze this from the perspective of a homicide detective in the critical first 48 hours of a missing persons case.
Okay, fair enough.
Statistically, older, hyper-involved male friends in cases of abducted women represent a massive red flag. The police were just following established, data-driven investigative protocols by applying pressure there.
So they were just playing the odds.
Essentially, yes. Furthermore, cooperation can be a tactic. Passing a polygraph is not a definitive exoneration. Polygraphs measure physiological arousal, not truth.
Right, they're notoriously unreliable.
Exactly. Psychopaths can pass them easily, while terrified, completely innocent people fail them constantly. Similarly, hypnosis is largely considered pseudoscience in modern forensics.
Oh, absolutely.
So the police were not entirely wrong to zero in on him initially. The danger, however, is that this focus metastasized into what we call a sunk cost fallacy.
Meaning they just invested too much time in him to let it go.
Right. When investigators spend years trying to force the evidence to fit their primary suspect, they develop tunnel vision, which allows the actual perpetrator to just slip further away.
And Van Cease maintained his innocence right up until his death in December 2024. He called his life a suspended hell.
It's very sad if he was truly innocent.
It is. And if he was innocent, tunnel vision is tragic, because it means resources were diverted away from other avenues. When the inner circle fails to yield a match, behavioral profilers have to shift their framework, right?
They do.
If the attacker didn't rely on intimate knowledge of her schedule, they must have relied on extreme physical proximity.
Geographical profiling becomes the immediate next step. When you exhaust the inner circle, you look at who had physical access to the victim's environment. And in 1995, Mason City harbored a very real proximity threat.
A man named Tony Jackson.
Yes.
Now, Tony Jackson's profile is deeply unsettling. For some context, he is currently incarcerated in Minnesota, serving a life sentence for a series of horrific, violent rapes.
He is a known predator.
But in 1995, Tony Jackson lived a mere 2 blocks away from the KMT broadcast studios, where Jodi worked every single day.
The recent Hulu documentary series, her last broadcast, heavily scrutinized Jackson as a primary person of interest.
Yeah, that doc really dug into him.
The circumstantial evidence surrounding him contains some very disturbing psychological triggers. At the time of Jodi's disappearance, Jackson was actually involved with a girlfriend who bore a striking physical resemblance to Jodi.
That is terrifying.
It gets worse. Crucially, that girlfriend terminated the relationship just days before the abduction.
See, in criminal profiling, that is a massive triggering event. You have a violent predator who experiences perceived rejection from a blonde woman, and mere days later, a blonde woman who works 2 blocks from his residence is violently blitz attacked in the dark.
The escalation makes terrifying sense.
It completely tracks, and the circumstantial clues didn't stop there. While Jackson was incarcerated for subsequent crimes, a cellmate came forward claiming Jackson had offered a rap lyric that explicitly detailed what happened to Jodi.
Right, the rap lyric tip.
Yeah, and this intelligence was deemed credible enough that law enforcement literally deployed specialized cadaver dogs to search an abandoned silo in Tiffin, Iowa, specifically hunting for her remains.
The deployment of cadaver dogs decades after a crime is a really fascinating forensic process, by the way. Those canine units are not smelling for a body in the traditional sense.
What are they looking for then?
They are trained to detect specific volatile organic compounds, the chemical signatures left behind in the soil from human decomposition. And those can persist for years, even if the remains are removed.
That is wild.
That's
But despite all of that, the geographical proximity, the psychological trigger, the cellmate's testimony, the Mason City police eventually ruled Tony Jackson out as a suspect.
They did.
And I have to admit, this is where I just hit a wall of confusion.
Right.
Like, how does a police department completely clear a convicted violent rapist who lived 2 blocks away, whose girlfriend looked like the victim, who got dumped the week of the crime, and who allegedly confessed in a rap song?
It seems baffling from the outside.
How do you just cross him off the whiteboard?
Well, from the outside, the optics of clearing him definitely seem absurd. But this really highlights the mechanics of how law enforcement operates behind closed doors.
Okay, explain that.
Police rarely convene a press conference to detail exactly why a suspect was exonerated. In 1995, establishing an ironclad alibi required tangible proof. They didn't have smartphone location data or ubiquitous security cameras like we do now.
Right, no digital footprint.
Exactly. So they relied on time-stamped credit card receipts, verified landline phone records, or sworn statements from multiple completely unassociated eyewitnesses, placing the suspect miles away at the exact time of the screams.
Oh, I see.
If police acquired that level of proof for Jackson at 4:30 a.m., he gets cleared. And they keep those alibis and the mechanisms of those alibis strictly classified to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation.
That makes sense. You know, you might be listening to this thinking, but what about the rap song? Isn't a confession in a lyric enough to secure a warrant?
Not usually.
Right, because in the legal system, unless those lyrics contain what investigators call holdback evidence, which are highly specific details about the crime scene that were never released to the press.
Like the exact location of the bent key, for example.
Exactly, or the specific brand of the blow dryer. If they don't have that, defense attorneys can easily dismiss the song as morbid fantasy, or just an attempt to build prison clout.
Precisely. And the documentary also floated other names, like Brad Millerburn, who was the ex-husband of Jodi's childhood best friend, and suspected serial killer Christopher Revac.
But nobody was ever elevated from a person of interest to an official suspect.
No. For nearly 3 decades, the investigation existed in this state of paralysis. It swung like a pendulum between those two behavioral archetypes.
The older, over-involved friend from the inner circle and the violent, opportunistic predator from the neighborhood.
Yes. And neither framework produced a forensic match to the palm print or the timeline.
But, you know, cold cases rarely stay cold when massive new variables are introduced. And private investigator Steve Ridge has relentlessly pursued this case.
He has been incredibly persistent.
He recently deployed the ultimate pressure tactic, which is a $100,000 reward for information leading to Jodi's remains, valid through June 2026.
That kind of money disrupts loyalties.
Big time. And it has yielded a staggering new tip that forces us to basically rethink the entire motive.
The intelligence Ridge brought forward introduces a completely distinct narrative. According to this tip, an unnamed male suspect initiated a romantic relationship with a woman just days prior to Jodi's disappearance.
Okay.
Sometime after the abduction, while driving through Minnesota with this woman, the suspect noticed they were being tailed by law enforcement vehicles.
And he panicked.
Completely.
Huh?
The psychological pressure of that moment caused a profound behavioral fracture. He violently pulled the vehicle over, began striking the steering wheel in a total state of distress, and repeatedly yelled, "I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I didn't do it, I did it."
Wow. The psychology of a confession like that is fascinating. It's almost like pouring water into a severely cracked vase.
How do you mean?
Like, you can try to hold it together with your hands, you can walk as carefully as possible, but the structural integrity is compromised, and the pressure eventually just forces a catastrophic leak.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
Carrying a murder confession, knowing you destroyed a human life, and orchestrated a 30-year cover-up, it imposes a crushing cognitive load on a person.
Your assessment of cognitive load is precisely how criminal psychologists view these delayed confessions. Maintaining a complex deception requires immense continuous mental energy.
Have to be exhausting.
It is. When you introduce an acute external stressor, such as being actively surveilled by police, combined with the internal suppressed guilt, the cognitive load simply exceeds the brain's processing capacity.
They just break.
The individual literally fractures under the weight, resulting in an involuntary, visceral purge of the truth.
And what makes this Minnesota geographic connection so compelling is that the Mason City police haven't just filed this tip away. They acted on it recently and aggressively.
Very aggressively.
Yeah, in October and November of 2025, investigators physically crossed state lines into Winsted, Minnesota.
The tactical deployment in Winsted was significant. Law enforcement brought in specialized canine units to conduct grid searches of a specific wooded area. Furthermore, they conducted operations at a recently demolished residential property in that same vicinity.
And the connective tissue here is remarkable because that demolished house was formerly owned by Brad Millerburn, one of the individuals previously scrutinized in the periphery of the case.
Right. And Ridge's working theory posits that a secret, newly formed romantic entanglement in the days immediately preceding the abduction triggered a sudden, jealousy-fueled act of violence.
Which introduces an entirely new motive.
It changes everything.
We aren't looking at an obsessed fan studying her broadcasts, and we aren't looking at a neighborhood predator stalking her apartment. We're looking at a sudden, violent spark of interpersonal jealousy.
Yes.
And this actually solves the logic puzzle of the 90-minute window perfectly.
How so?
Well, if someone she was newly secretly involved with knew she had to leave for work at 4:30 a.m., they wouldn't need to surveil her for weeks to learn her routine.
Oh, right.
They would inherently possess the scheduling intelligence required to execute a flawless blitz attack.
It fundamentally reorganizes the behavioral profile. It bypasses the requirement for the perpetrator to be some calculated criminal mastermind. It merely requires an individual who was granted intimate access to her life in the narrow window of days right before the crime occurred.
Just a spark of jealousy in the right timing.
Exactly. It aligns the forensic evidence with human unpredictability.
We have tracked an unbelievable investigative journey today. I mean, we started in the terrifyingly narrow window of a dark Iowa parking lot, dissecting bent keys and partial palm prints.
We covered a lot of ground.
We analyzed the heavy scrutiny applied to John Vance's and the geographical profiling of Tony Jackson. And now we arrive at a potentially game-changing roadside confession in Minnesota 30 years after the fact, with police bringing dogs to demolished homes.
The momentum shifts in this case are really a testament to the relentless dedication of the individuals who refuse to let this file just gather dust in an archive.
Absolutely.
The Find Jodi team, spearheaded by dedicated professionals like former investigative journalist Caroline Lowe, Josh Benson, and Gary Peterson, they have maintained a continuous, glaring spotlight on the evidence.
Which is so important.
It is, because in the criminal justice system, it is frighteningly easy for a cold case to be reduced to a mere tracking number.
And we absolutely cannot forget the human element at the center of all this analysis. Jodi Huisentruit wasn't just a true crime mystery or some cautionary tale about early morning safety.
No, she was a real person.
She was a deeply ambitious, talented 27-year-old woman. She loved her friends, she was passionate about golf, she was successfully navigating a highly competitive television industry.
And her future was violently stolen from her in the dark.
Maintaining that humanity is the true anchor of any cold case investigation.
Always.
So as we close the file on today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to process.
Okay.
We have a massive $100,000 reward actively in play. We have law enforcement crossing state lines, deploying canine units, and digging through the foundations of demolished houses in Minnesota based on decades-old secrets.
The pressure is definitely on.
Did the recent unsealing of old warrants and the immense pressure of a cash reward finally spook the real killer into making a fatal, observable mistake? Did they finally confess to the wrong person? Or is the ultimate missing puzzle piece, the one singular clue that definitively ties the partial palm print to the white van and the screaming in the dark, still sitting quietly in a dusty police file, just waiting for the right pair of fresh eyes to finally understand what it means?
That is the defining tension of this case right now. The psychological and investigative pressure is mounting rapidly, and someone, somewhere, possesses the exact knowledge of what truly transpired in that parking lot.
I want you to imagine your normal morning routine one more time. The alarm goes off. You step out your front door into the quiet dark. We owe it to Jodi to finally uncover exactly who was waiting in the shadows when she stepped out of hers.